The BMD Podcast, anytime you want. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm the BMD. On our show segment today, MLB, Major League Broadcasting. We've been blessed to have somebody from the insurance industry. Brett Russell has been invited, took the invite, and is on the show. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Mr. BMD, I'm good. How are you?
Good, sir. Good, sir. Listen, we often have interesting topics we like to share with our listener and viewership, and I was very attractive to have the topic of the insurance business because there's lots of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we may have to have you back on because I understand you have a wealth of knowledge in that industry. So just to get started, to cue the listeners and viewers into you, a little bit about your background, how you got started, why the insurance industry. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Almost 20 years. I had to think about that before I came on. Almost 20 years doing this, which is nuts.
So why that industry?
I fell into it. I was doing some customer service for actually some eBay-based company, and I got headhunted in a huge way and ended up with one of the big insurance companies in Canada, and started out there and just kind of grew on my own, and then decided I wanted to get in the broker side of things. So joined a brokerage, and here I am today,
so
20 years later.
You start out as an agent?
I started out as an agent for a large insurance company in Canada, like a very, very small fish in a big pond. So,
and then what made you graduate to a broker?
You know what? That's a whole segment in itself, but brokerages are the way to go for clients for sure when handling insurance. You've got someone who's going to fight for you, advocate for you, and it gave me a lot more of an ability to work with clients one-on-one than it did on the other side of the industry. So,
and what about when you say fight for clients? Is it a messy, dirty business in the sense of cutthroat?
I think it's a messy, dirty business. I think anytime you've got someone who's in the middle, that is a middleman to help you, let's say, negotiate a claim, speak to something on, let's say, a property insurance side, that it would be a little bit more difficult if you're one-on-one with an agent at one of the big insurance companies.
So how does one decide what is the perfect scenario in your world? Tell the listeners and viewers how you would select a proper agent, broker, and insurance company. What are, maybe the top few things you can announce to have the viewing membership here, have them feel good about if they're out scouting for insurance? What do you do?
I know people are always hung up on price. Price is a big factor. We're in Ontario, it's a competitive market. So you've got a lot of different places to shop from. I think you have to decide right away, do I want what they call a direct writer? So a big company, let's call it the TDs, the RBCs of the world, where I'm going to be a contact center kind of agent. So every time you call, you're going to get somebody completely different. So do I want that sort of service in my life? Do I want that sort of experience for insurance? Or do I want a broker? And the broker is somebody who's going to source out. They could have access to 20 or 30, different insurance markets and be able to source you out that way. And they can search for the best price. But on top of that, a broker is going to look for a company that they know handles claims in a good way, would be able to help you and would be successful in helping you negotiate an auto or property insurance claim. So your first decision is kind of, where do I want to go? Do I want to be another number in a call center? Or do I want to be with a brokerage and with a broker and somebody who knows my name and that I could call and say, hey, Brett, I've got this issue. I need your advice on this. So I think that's one or two factors that are big. Another factor is the fact that, hey, like when it comes to an actual insurance policy itself, do I want to have something that's cookie cutter, or do I want to be with a company that I know or a broker that's going to be able to search out something that may be a little bit more specific, that might meet a need that I want? And the biggest thing is your friends and family. Find out from your friends and family, what do they love about their insurance experience? Because hey, let's face it, insurance is not something we love paying on a regular basis. It's a necessity, especially if you got a mortgage or obviously if you want to drive. But find out what is working with your family member. Why do they love where they are insured, or why do they hate where they're insured? Asking around's a big thing. A lot of my business is word of mouth. People that are like, Brett does this well, or I like working with Brett because of A, B, and C. So find out from your friends and family what they like and what's worked well from them. I think that's always a big thing.
So how do you know when you've got the right company, the right agent and broker? I mean, I know there's the feel good, I can save you money, this company, the claim, all the things you mentioned. But at the end of the day, how do you know? Give some help here on how do you know you're with the right person?
I think your biggie is always testing the field. You got to be able to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Ask them, what is a deductible, Brett? What is my collision coverage cover me? Brett, does this on my property insurance cover me for flood? Can they answer questions proficiently? Are they able to take the time, and are they quick to rush you off the phone? Do they seem like they just want a sale, or are they there to actually answer questions? I get calls all the time from clients, family members, or people that'll say, hey, Brett, would you mind just answering a question? I do it all the time, not because because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to give you a hand. I'm not here to make a quick buck. I would rather provide you with some good advice than just be trying to put you on the books for another sale. So really, I would say take the time and ask the hard questions. Be prepared to do a little bit of grilling, a little bit of interviewing. Find out if they know what they're talking about. And if they do, then I think you're headed down the right path. Insurance in Ontario is so legislated, so it's very tough for an agent to really, what's the word I want to use, screw you, let's say, in terms of coverages, especially on the auto side. But you want to be dealing with somebody that you're comfortable with and someone that you can have a relationship with and know that they're always going to be fighting for your best right.
Interesting. Now, you being 20 years plus in the industry, are
Yep.
you word of mouth now, or are you still going to advertise, or, your connection now, your phone's always ringing?
I do not advertise. I don't. I work for a smaller brokerage in Toronto. It's all word of mouth. I don't solicit. I don't want to solicit. I don't need to be that big, huge fish. So really it's just Mike likes what I'm doing. So Mike says, hey, give my guy Brett a call. That's the majority of my business. The brokerage helps. I'm in a great small brokerage where we don't even do a lot of advertising either. It's just word of mouth because we provide great service. It's that simple.
What about the pandemic we're in? Two sides of the question. First question, how has it affected you? Obviously, perhaps maybe working from home instead of bricks and mortar downtown.
Yep.
Second side of it, is there now COVID insurance?
So on the first part, it's busier. I don't know if that speaks to our human condition. People are buying more cars than ever. That shocked me. I didn't think we'd be as busy as we were. So I am busier than ever. Properties are selling like crazy. Toronto's busier than ever with real estate, which again surprised me. I think we had a lull from March into probably June, July, but it's been gangbusters since, especially in the communities where their numbers aren't so bad. When you get into Durham region, and some of those northern kind of areas where things have stayed pretty healthy and steady, they're busier than ever. So business is busy. Working from home, I've always telecommuted. So I've always been a little bit of a hybrid. I think it's the way to go. I think when you've got any sort of employee that's not stressed out and has an opportunity to work from either, it's a good thing. It's a learning curve. I think anyone who hasn't worked at home, sometimes instantly, it can be overwhelming. You've got TVs, you've got kids, you've got all kinds of things that you can pull at your distractions. So it's being able to find that balance between home and work. That's always difficult, but for me, I enjoy it. I thrive in it. I do well. I probably work a little bit too hard sometimes being at home, whereas in the office, you tend to be a little bit more distracted. So working from home has been okay. What was your second question? You had something else regarding COVID.
Is there COVID insurance available now?
Tough. So it doesn't affect most of my business in terms of the auto and the property side. The only gray area, and it's very gray, and I would caution listeners, I know when school was going back, there's a lot of online learning going on as versus in the classroom. And there was this discussion of bubbling or getting kids kind of working together in groups with different families. You want to be very careful with that. You want to call your broker insurance company and say, is that something I can do in my home? Because generally it's not, especially in something like this where we've got a huge like public health crisis right now. But in terms of health insurers, from my understanding, there's not a whole heck of a lot out there. I know it's evolving, but it's always slow. I think some of the airlines, like Air Canada, I know is offering it complimentary through one of the big insurance companies, I think, and that's probably more of a liability thing and making sure that they're not getting the pantsuit off of them if someone gets sick on their flight. So at least someone, if they're stuck in the States or internationally, they have some form of coverage. But I think we'll see it grow, but I think until they get a grasp on this whole thing, you're not going to see a lot of coverage.
So where's the insurance industry headed during the COVID? I know you said you're busy, car
Yep.
and home insurance.
Yep.
Is it because of the pandemic, or are you now going to be pretty much at home forever? Is the bricks and mortar big business, is it going to slow down with the pandemic? And well, where's the insurance industry headed in your mind?
I think more and more people have been buying online over the last 10 years. You see it with Amazon. You see all the, like, people are doing less and less shopping in bricks and mortar. So people doing more and more business online is not unheard of. I think we're going to see more and more of that progress. You're always going to have people that are still going to want to potentially be face to face with a broker, where that's tough right now. Are we going to see more of these Zoom type meetings like you and I are having right now to accommodate it? Probably. Who knows where it's going? I know that my industry tended to be a little bit slower to try to encourage the whole work from home dynamic. I think COVID forced a lot of it to happen a lot quicker. My brokerage had always kind of been ahead of that trend. We've always kind of stayed ahead. And so a lot of us had worked from home already, so it wasn't a big deal. But I think going forward, we're going to see some probably dramatic changes. Offices being smaller. I mean, some people have thousands and thousands of square feet that they just don't need of real estate for offices where they can accommodate people from home. So I think we're probably going to trend that way more and more. We'll see probably more and more home-based agents, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
It's a new way of life, obviously, isn't it?
It's a new learning curve for a lot of people. I'm thankful that I had this curve. You know, I've been doing it, I think, like 9 years kind of from home so it wasn't a huge deal for me. We had phone systems that were already set up. We were ahead of it, but I know a lot of people had to move fast, and it didn't go well initially for some people, but I think over time it's evolved for sure.
What about your thoughts when an insurance company gets overwhelmed in hurricane, tornado, mass damage, Mother Nature's not happy, and explosions, power outages, all the craziness? I've always wondered, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, where do they get the money to cut the check? I know they're collecting monthly, but when it's just massive of millions, hundreds of millions, where do they get the money to cut the check? Or do they just say, here's what we got, and they're done?
So the biggie is, I think a lot of people don't realize, and when I explain it, people kind of get a little ticked off when they think about it, but let's use the example of auto insurance. When you submit your money for, let's say, Mike, you're paying $1,500 per year for your car, your driving ability in Toronto. That $1,500 is deposited into a large pool. And that's how insurance is like the pooling of money. So everyone's premiums within that company are shoved into this giant pool of money. And that money is invested and reinvested and reinvested and reinvested again. And so that money is then used to pay out on subsequent claims that happen. So these guys smartly, for years and years and years ago, learned how to invest and reinvest again. It's pretty tough to bankrupt an insurance company. And some of them have been making record profits for a long, long, long time.
So they have the money. They have the money to cut the check under all evils.
Generally, yes. And that's been the beef, whether it's big banks or insurance companies for years. The public has kind of cried out on large profits and these guys making, decent amount of coin. And they have in some respects. There's the flip side where insurance companies can bleed a lot too. You mentioned hurricanes. Like some of those things can be disastrous. Are they going to go fully bankrupt? It would be tough. But I mean, that potential is there depending on what happens. I'm sure on the commercial side of things right now, there's a lot of claims going through for loss of business, like people learning their earning capacity with COVID and that sort of thing. That's, I'm sure, increased quite a bit. So there's going to be a bit of a bleed there. They're going to find creative ways probably to not have that go through or to not pay it, depending on what's going on or what the verbiage is in someone's policy. But that's generally how they collect their money, how they reinsure it, and how they stay afloat.
So different areas statistically, and I know your business runs on data and statistics. There's obviously, we're living here in the Toronto greater GTA. There must be pockets that are good, pockets that are bad. Can you tell us about, not necessarily the areas, because I don't want to throw any stones in any suburbs, but can you tell how they come up with the good, bad, and ugly in situations of areas in Toronto and the surrounding GTA for, hey, you're living over here, your rates are up because of ABC. How does all that work?
So the super smarties, called the actuaries at the insurance companies, they study areas. They've got it down to a fine art of postal code. You could be in, L1P is versus L1R, and they know that P is way, way worse than R. So they'll charge it accordingly. And they basically look at auto. They look at claims frequency. So are a lot of people in that area getting into accidents? And is it because there's just bad drivers or there's a lot of situational things that go on in that area? And they also look at the biggest thing when they're in our province that doesn't get talked about enough is fraud. Is that area prone to more fraud? Are more people scamming the system when it comes to accidents and those sorts of things? So there are definitely pockets within Ontario where that sort of activity is a lot higher. And unfortunately, if you're living in that area or it's typical that you drive in that area a lot, you will spend a lot more money. And I've had it for years, frustrations with clients, and I get it because there's nothing worse than being penalized because of where you live. But that's where that whole pocket and pool of money that we talked about before comes into play, because they're paying out from that pool for that area. And if you're going to be in that area and that's a higher risk area, you've got to pay accordingly. There's just no two ways around it.
Now, you mentioned, you segued into one of my next questions, which was the scammers and the insurance fraud. Of $1 spent, not invested, of $1 spent, what do you think the percentage of dollars that go in, just your opinion, that go into the scammers and the fraud on how that's affected in payment?
I wish I knew more in that area. I know that from our broker's perspective and from the Brokers Association, we wish that a lot more money went from the government and the insurance companies to fight it, because it's affecting you and I in a huge way. It not only does it eat at the profits, but it eats at the rates that you and I pay. It affects, a lot of people think, oh, is this car good for me to buy? Therefore, if I drive this car, my rates are going to be lower. That's playing such a small part in what's going on now with people's rates. We have accident benefits, which our province is the richest in Canada for paying out. God forbid if you get into an accident. It's great what we have, but you pay for it, and you will pay for it. So I wish I had a hard figure for you, but I wish the government and are these insurance companies would spend more combating it, because it's a huge issue, and it goes beyond just the scammer. You have professionals in the industry, I will say, of different types of professions that are in that process of, let's say, once again, auto accidents, and they encourage it, and they've learned to make money off of it, and they'll get shut down, but they find ways to reinvent it to make more money. And so that's where it becomes difficult, and that's where I wish there was more pushback happening.
So what is the biggest crime in insurance in your feeling?
Definitely well, we were just talked about fraud. Fraud is the biggie. Fraud, we'll get situations where, I had a situation a couple of years ago where in a particular area in Toronto, we had people purposely slamming on their brakes at certain intersections, and they would fill the car up with as many as they could to fit seatbelts, even sometimes more. And everyone would get hit from behind, and everyone would have a major issue with their neck and their back and their this and their that. And the problem is, then you can think about it. Insurance companies know that it's cheaper to settle than it is to fight it all the way through. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times, they'll put out a settlement, and let's say the settlement's just 15 or 20K. That's small for an auto accident and an injury. Times that by 5 people in the car, times that rate of incidence by X amount across the province, you can see where the money bleeds. And then you've got people digging into physio, people digging into all these things. It kills it monetarily. It's a lot of money being bled.
So does the insurance company have a subculture of investigators to say, hey, you are scamming us, we aren't paying you 5 cents?
There's a lot of SIUs, which the special investigation units within a lot of the big insurance companies, they have them. Do they have the full teeth that they need? No. Has the government been proactive in helping a lot of it? Not really. And this isn't a political slant. It doesn't matter what party it is. They've not been helpful. And there's just, I feel like they just don't have enough to clamp down on. And that's going to take some large legislative changes to make that happen.
So is the industry, the insurance industry, right from the agents to the brokers, to the thieves, to the scammers, is it a bad business to be in?
No. I think that there's every industry has their downsides, right? And I think that the normal human condition is to find ways to get creative, to find different avenues. Brokers and agents, we are highly, highly legislated. We have let's say, well, I'll talk about brokers first. We have a huge backbone where we are looked at constantly. We have certain credentials we have to meet. If we find out that we've been deceitful or dishonest, there's a board that we're in front of, and they're not afraid to get rid of brokers. They're not afraid to discipline and cut you loose, and you lose your license for life. Like they don't play around with it. So there's a lot of measures in place to take care of the bad seeds. And thankfully, even in watching over my 20 years, I don't think there's always bad seeds, but there's not been huge bad seeds. And there's definitely not been numerous amounts of bad seeds. So no, I don't think it's a bad industry at all. I think like any industry though, it's got its dark points, of course.
So what about schooling and staying educated, staying up with the time? Are you,
Yep.
Are you filtered by the legislation that you have to pass these courses every couple of years, or to know what you're talking about to keep your license?
Yep.
Maybe tell us about some of your regulations you have to abide by.
Yeah. So, I mean, on top of getting your actual like Rebo license, and people can usually obtain it through local college or university courses. It takes a certain period of time. Once you've gotten that and you've done your large examination process every year, or I should say for the first couple of years, you are supervised. You're always supervised by whoever's, let's say for a broker, you're under a brokerage, you're being supervised. They have to provide updates on what you do, your business practice, all of that. But on top of that, we also have a requirement every year to meet a certain amount of CE credits or continuing education credits. So we have to have a certain amount every year. Believe it's 10. And it's always from different areas. So ethics, we're talking about personal management. There's all kinds of different areas, and we have to hit those, and we have to be able to prove that we've done that every year. So there's the educational thing. We're always learning.
So
It's
with the
always
learning,
evolving.
evolving, and education, is that the only way you stay on your game, or do you offer a different twist? Weaving through all the paperwork, do you have a better way to stay competitive and keep your edge up?
Slightly different question. I think the edge up for my business, for me anyways, I think service always sells. I could sell you anything to the yin yang. At the end of the day, are you going to come back if I've sold you something that's cheap, but I can't meet up to what I said? And, by year 2, you're gone. No, it's going to be the fact that we've developed a relationship. We know each other. I know your wife, or I know your partner. I know your kids. And I actually care about, your life. And on top of that, being able to get you into a product that I know is going to be a right fit for you and your family. That service sells. That's the biggie. You don't just want the cheapest in the game, because the cheapest, it's like anything. You could always pick the cheapest. The cheapest is rarely the best.
Now, products in the game. Are there new products that are coming out all the time? I know we touched a little bit on COVID product, whether that's being offered to initiate things getting going, but are there new products, on the table for companies?
So auto's tough because auto is so legislated, right? There's always little innovation. So for instance, there used to be a product on your car. So if you bought a brand new car and you had what they call a total loss, the car was written off in the first 2 years, there was something on there called a waiver of depreciation. That used to only be 2 years. Many of the companies have expanded it to 4 years now, which is great. God forbid and a total loss is sadly very feasible in Toronto, depending on where you are. So it's nice to have that backup, because you're still paying a lease or you're still paying a finance. So it's nice to know that that's going to be fully covered. There's been more changes made around. Some companies now offer what they call minor conviction protection. So if you get, some silly little speeding ticket or something, unfortunately, rather than your rate jumping by $700-800, that is in there as a buffer to protect you from that bump happening. So they'll cover off one ticket within a 3-year period. So you've got that on there. The biggest change in the last 5 years on the home side is flood coverage. That's come back. There was only what they called sewer backup coverage, where we're talking about, your sewer lines kind of backing up into a basement. Whereas now, unfortunately, because of where weather is going, there's a lot more flooding going on. So a lot of the consumers demanded having it being put back. It was in personal lines policies years ago, but people wanted it gone because they wanted to save money on their home. But now, unfortunately, as weather's gotten worse, we've needed that flood coverage. So that's come back. Is it pricey? Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you're being covered for the peril of water. And water is an insidious thing when it comes to home insurance, because, as you know, it can damage any or everything in your house. So flood coverage coming back is a biggie. It's come back in the last few years, and it's not going anywhere for sure, because it's needed.
Final question. We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Where would you like to see the insurance industry go, where there's a happy medium from company right to, call it the big guy, not versus the little guy, but the big guy and the little guy getting along?
I'd like to see a little bit more streamlining. I think that's where we need the government to pop in a little bit more. I know that in Canada, you've got your government-based insurances versus our market in Ontario, which is competitive. Sometimes it can be a little bit wild, wild west here. I think there's ways to kind of hone it in a little bit better. I know that some of the big players in Ontario are buying out some of the smaller companies right now, are trying. And I think that can be a good, but also very bad thing for business. So I definitely think there needs to be a little bit more regulation along those lines. Our industry always evolves. I'm never worried about it changing. Things are, AI, artificial intelligence is coming in big time with tracking of stuff, and that's changing. So we're going to have to get smarter. Like we've evolved a lot there, but even smarter to handle that. And as brokers, we have to stay relevant. I mean, we could be replaced at any point by a little, device that monitors you in a car. I think at the end of the day, though, a device is not going to help you with your property insurance. It's not going to be able to monitor and do what you did. So I don't think brokers are going anywhere. We just have to stay smart in a technology-based world right now, which seems to be rapidly changing. We're just going to have to continue to play smart. And our broker association in Ontario has done really well. I just hope that they step even further, as I said, with advocating in the government to make sure that we're well protected, but most of all, that us as a public is well protected in terms of rates and everything else. So,
Brett, this has been great talking with you. Final note, how can people reach out to you if they need to talk to you after this interview when it breaks?
So easiest way would probably be by email. So my email is brussell, RUSSELL, at IBMG.ca. So I work for a brokerage by the name of IBMG Canada, and you can get a hold of me there. That's the best way.
All right. Well, listen, folks, hope you had a great time. We really went into that topic about the insurance business. Glad to have our guest, Brett Newell. What? Brett Russell. You thought I was going to say something else.
I know.
I was going to say Brett Newby, but Brett Russell is here. How can I call him a newbie? He's been here 20 plus years. Anyways, great having you there. Folks, you've been listening to our MLB show segment, Major League Broadcasting. I'm your host, the BMD, and you're not. But stay tuned. If you're happy, tell a friend. Brett, we'll see you next time.